welcome back to the Hennessy's House with me, your host, Nicole Hennessy. Today, we're going to talk with Ange Dallesandro, and she's going to talk to us all about her life story and how she's known as the singing parent coach on social media and loves to have fun as a mom and does a great job at teaching other parents how to do the same. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. I was really pumped when you reached out, so I'm glad to have this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I loved your vibe, and your videos are so fun and lighthearted in a time where sometimes we forget to have fun and be lighthearted. Things are crazy right now.
Just a smidge. Yeah, I would say so. I think it's a pretty serious time. So I thought, why not hit the internet with some levity? It's desperately needed. A little bit of escapism while still being about how to change things at home. Real life application, but a little bit of fun at the same time.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So I want to know what inspired you to do all of this. I mean, I know obviously you said, with the times we're living in, but most people that have like such a strong passion about the way they choose to parent their children or the way they're living their life, it comes from a story of their own that maybe isn't so bright and fun. So I would love it if you could share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where to begin? In preparation for today, I always try to sort of compartmentalize the different elements of my story to make it a little bit easier to share. And I never sort of get better at that. Boiling down who you are and where you came from and what you went through is so complex, and it's definitely hard to quantify. However, I am a born and bred Jersey girl. I grew up just a stone's throw from Manhattan. And although I don't live in the town I grew up in, I'm even closer to Manhattan now. So I started performing at a young age because we live in an area where it's actually feels pretty accessible. We're seeing theater all the time. I live very close to a lot of famous actors, so it's just like, oh, I don't have to uproot my life to have this lifestyle. And it's something that might be possible. So I did my first musical at age 5. Still local, but then I started going on auditions in the city and singing the national anthem for the New Jersey Devils and the Boston Red Sox, and really kind of threw myself into the performing arts, but was always writing a lot on the side and just wanted to find a way to merge my passions. And when I was 7 or 8, I was convinced that meant I was going to be a singing veterinarian. But, times have changed a little. Still love animals, but
Cute dream though. That's real
yeah,
cute. I love
it
it.
was. I was convinced I was going to be singing vet. And then for a while, I had an at-home radio show that I recorded on cassette tape and would write jingles to actually put commercials in between my songs. So I've basically been writing and singing in some capacity as long as I can remember. I finally said, I think I want to try being a regular person. And to me, being a regular person meant not living in a condemned house with 10 other women doing 8 shows a week up in Rochester, New York, or, subletting a studio to do some show somewhere, living with mice and what, the artist life is a little chaotic. Then COVID hit. I couldn't teach music class anymore. I had been bringing my kids to that, which was great, but I needed a way to take it out of my house and back into interacting with other people. So I started with a contract with TikTok back in July of 2020, making really short form educational parenting content. And after a few months of doing that, I said, what if I sing to them instead of just talk at them? I said, what if, all the songs, we can remember songs from our childhood. We remember every word. Our generation is really getting back into listening to 90s music, and all that stuff is coming around again. The kids are into these days. And I said, there's so much nostalgia in music. There's so much ability in music to touch people and really affect them deeply. And what if I sang about parenting? What if I sang about how to be in a good headspace while your kids are screaming? What if I sang about how to teach kids proper names of their anatomy? What if I sang about how parenting is inherently political? So I started doing that, and it has been going really well, but I took a step back just while I built my website and all those things.
Yeah.
But what you really asked, I just wanted to tell you how I arrived at singing and rapping. I did my rap about sharing is really what went viral on TikTok and built my audience there. But what got me to a place of levity was the fact that I did not grow up as a kid who knew how to have fun. I do partly to my performance background, I was very intent on being taken seriously. You know, being a girl who sang and danced and acted and who always needed to look nice and who always needed to know how to interact with adults and be smiley and get her cue right. I learned at a young age that I had to be seen as a hard worker and I had to be seen as somebody who was intelligent. Um, and because I was in an industry that so often had, you know, creative people who, for no better way to put it, were not always reliable, were not always dependable. I
Yeah.
wanted to be taken seriously as basically a business person. I really was sensitive to that at a young age. And so I wasn't necessarily rhyming except in my house doing my radio show. You know, I wasn't having a lot of fun as a kid. And it just sort of, you know, I've spent a lot of time in the past few years, obviously having my own kids, trying to look at that chicken or the egg. But by the time I was 5 years old, I was sneaking food, I was binging. I understood inherently that um, people felt strongly about food as a way to control, as a way to bond and bribe and punish. And what do kids do? You know, we're social scientists. So I say we like I'm still a kid. People are, but kids especially. It's how they learn how the world works.
Yeah.
So this thing that, you know, I would go visit my grandmother across the street and she would give me food and she'd say, "Don't tell your mother," you know, at 4 years old. And she wanted to bond with me and watch game shows and eat more cookies. But I thought, why would my mom care what I ate? Why would this be something that had to be a secret? What does this mean about extra cookies, you know? And being this really sensitive, curious child, it just became this thing that I sort of ran with. Well, what happens if I eat more? What's going to happen to my body? And what are people going to think about that?
Oh.
And because I grew up across the street from my extended family, there was really a culture in my family of closeness and of no need for privacy. And I thought, well, I want
Mm.
privacy. I want something that's mine. And so in the midst of all of these sort of external forces of noticing my family dynamics and performing and noticing the importance of appearance in a professional capacity at a young age, and really thirsting for more of that because I wanted to express myself, but I didn't want to be judged.
Right.
All those feelings conflicting. You know, I was eating in the closet, I was hiding food after everybody went to bed. Typical behaviors a lot of kids exhibit, but you know, I like to go hard, I guess, when I do things. And it's no exaggeration to say that it dominated. And I often say that on a less gracious day, I would say stole my entire childhood and adolescence. Um, because what happens is when you overeat, your body wants to get rid of it, your stomach gets sick. And then I was able to connect the dots and say, I can beat this to the punch and I can get rid of my food on my own, or I can just eat until that happens. So then I became addicted to the cycle of binging and purging. And I was in school and I could time when I ate and when I would get sick on my bathroom breaks. And this continued
Wow.
forever, you know, and I
Yeah.
was stuffing myself into clothes that didn't fit me anymore and walking around in pain from too tight pants by the age of 8 and 9, even before puberty. It was just the lens through which I experienced the world.
That's an interesting psychological view of that because, I mean, like, you know, obviously, society speaking, we hear a lot about eating disorders, but the way you just explained binge eating to me was like very eye-opening because we do tend to be like, shh, don't tell, you can have this, but don't let your brother know, or don't, you know, that kind of stuff. And then the cycle of overeating and then making yourself sick is like that makes sense because it will naturally happen and then you got ahead of it, right? Like I never
Yeah.
thought of it that way and I'm sure you're not the only one. It's I never have experienced it myself, so that's probably why I haven't thought of it that way. But you don't hear people
Yeah.
talk about that.
No, it was, you know, I was just speaking to someone recently, a new internet friend of mine, about my eating disordered background. And I forget what she said, but it led to me saying, you know, I've never counted calories because I couldn't restrict. I wasn't capable of it. You know, here it was something that I thought I was controlling, and it so quickly controlled me. The bullet train took off, and it was just, and because I was so young, I had no framework on how to function without it.
Yeah.
It was genuinely, I read when I was starting my recovery, you binge if you do this, however, whatever the minimum was, however many meals a day, however many times a week. And I thought, but where's the every meal of every day, 7 days a week? Like, where's that? It was not cyclical for me. It was the only way that
Wow.
I experienced food. And when I started recovery, it took a full 2 years for me to be able to eat a meal and have my body know what to do with the food in a way that was healthy. I
Wow.
mean, it was,
Right. That makes sense because physically your body is now programmed, right? Like you
oh yeah,
programmed your body to respond to food. It's like, oh no, it's going to be too much. And now, like, okay, it came into me. Now it has to come out of me. So, like,
yeah,
I mean, weight aside, like the way that your body probably wasn't absorbing nutrition properly, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you're putting into your body or like what the weight issue is. I'm sure your body is not absorbing the nutrition it needs
yeah.
from the food.
It was definitely. I used to joke, because of course you apply a sense of humor to these things that are
Yeah.
pretty dark. But I used to joke like it was sort of the worst eating disorder because it wasn't even, making me thinner. I would joke about all the things that people wanted, the reason they had disordered eating. And of course, that's a really limited view. But when you're in it, I thought, well, I'm still absorbing these calories. It's not, but at the same time, a big part of it was actually keeping my weight a little bit up because they always say, oh, if you lose the weight, is your life going to be better? And for me, my weight, which was maybe only, a small amount overweight at any given time, or not even by societal standards, but by the standards of the industry that I was in, I lost so many jobs because I wasn't thin enough. But
Yeah,
like,
that's a hard industry, right?
yeah.
That's
So
a
my
hard
life would
industry.
have ostensibly been better if I had, lost weight. But I didn't want to. It was always like, well, oh, I can't have wild success because I got this problem, because I didn't want it. It took me a long time to realize that I just wasn't in place to handle it. But all of those factors sort of birthed each other. I wasn't able to handle it because I was devoting all of my mental bandwidth to to this beast that I carried around.
So almost like self-sabotage in a way there.
Yes,
Yeah.
1,000,000%. And then, so that's just the food aspect of it. I was also homeschooled on and off throughout my grammar school and high school career. I joke I've never been part of a graduation ceremony. I've never worn a cap and gown because I was homeschooling or distance learning at the end of every different block of education. But I went away to college after having been homeschooled my senior year of high school and was not prepared to take care of myself in any way, shape, or form. And it was the first time that I wasn't policed. I just went crazy and totally dove into these behaviors and hit rock bottom. Uh, it was an unmitigated disaster. And I was away at school. I almost failed out of the first school. I went to a second college and came home before the end of the first semester from the second school. And thank goodness I did, because 2 months after I moved back home, now like broken, you know, lost, misguided, like just no clue what was going on. I had only just turned 18 because I was 16 when I graduated high school because I'm gifted, which adds a whole different, layer to this whole thing. So I graduated high
Yeah.
school a couple months before my 17th birthday. Had to take my driver's test at college, that couldn't sign any papers. My parents had to come. So I was very young. And I was home when I found out that my best friend had taken his life. And, it's funny, you can look at a whole life and think, well, I needed to be somewhere at a particular moment. And there is no way that I could have been away at college when this happened to me. And hung in there. Like, at least I had already not hung in there and saved my parents a little bit of money by coming home, because I needed to be home for that. And less than 2 months later, my grandmother, with the game shows and the cookies, died very suddenly. And then 6 weeks later, my dog that I'd had since I was 6. And then 2 months after that, my next door neighbor. And then 3 months after that, my last grandparent. So from December 29th to October 6th was just 10 months packed with, I would still
Grief.
people not to even come near me because you might die. Who knows?
I mean, that
So
is way too much grief at once.
it was
That's
a lot.
the grieving process for each of the, like, how do you even, like, as soon as you're getting past one part of grieving one person, you're hit with the first part of grieving another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I realized though is a few months into watching Arrested Development until 5 o'clock every morning and then getting up for the job that I decided to get to try to pull myself out of this. I was office managing a physical therapy facility, which was incredibly healing because I got to watch people get better every day, stroke victims, people that had accidents and, um, all of these sort of different
Yeah.
situations. And I had to dive into the healing of other people, which was just a beautiful thing and had come into my life at just the right time when I was so, so hurt. But I was a few months in and I realized that I wasn't engaging in my disordered eating behaviors anymore. And because I was just too busy, I was too disconnected, I was too hurt. And I said to myself, if I go back to this, all of this stuff will have been in vain. Like all of this grief and all of this pain, if I come out of this and just try to go back to the person that I was before, who
Mm.
was not so great, um, then this whole experience was for nothing and it will just be signifying pain, forever. And so I said, okay, that's a great decision to make, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. I need to start talking about it. I need to let people know where I'm at and be honest because it might surprise you to hear that if you had asked me if I had an eating disorder, I would have said no. I just,
Not me.
I just, it's just the thing that I did. I don't, I had sort of people throughout my life try to bring it up from time to time. I had parents who were pretty aware that, something was amiss.
I was going to ask you that, like, how did your
Yeah.
parents not see this
Oh my
happening?
gosh, my parents are awesome. And they'll listen to this and they're pretty used to me being frank about this stuff, unfortunately, and I'm always occasionally saying, hey guys, I'm sorry, I got to talk about this today.
Yeah.
But I like to say they're the dictionary definition of people who did the best they could with what they had.
Yeah.
I mean, they both had a lot of trauma in their lives and different issues with their parents and addiction on both sides. And it just, they made things so much better for my older brother and I than what they had experienced. But their resources were limited, their capacity was limited. The awareness was limited. It was a different time. And for all of the wonderful, amazing things that they did and the opportunities that they allowed me to have, there was this side that just they didn't have access to.
Right.
And that was sort of, it birthed itself because they wanted so badly to raise kids with whom there were no secrets. And there was such an openness that's why I retreated so much and why I created something that was just mine.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel like as we parent our children, a lot of times, and hopefully most of the time, we're breaking cycles from our own childhoods of things that we wish were different for us. And but like we take things to this place because of our childhood. So if we're trying to break a cycle, we tend to extremely do it different. So what your parents did with you is make sure that they were always available and they were always up there in your business because that's, which made you feel like you really needed something that was just you. So now you're trying to balance that. And the balance, I think, is what's so important because there's you never know what the long-term effect of something is. And so it's like parenting is not all or nothing. Does that make sense? So it's like, I'm going to be very secretive and separate from my child because our business is ours and theirs is theirs. Or you're like, we all share everything. And both of those can have consequences.
Yeah. And, my parents were raised in that whole children can be seen and not heard. Baby boomer generation,
Yeah.
their birthdays are 7 days apart. They were both born in 1955. So, it's just like right in the meat of that generation where their parents lived through so much and, had a very different mindset of the role that children would play within a family unit rather. So I my father still sort of approached parenthood from that place.
Yeah.
And then my mom went the total opposite extreme. And there were just not a lot of boundaries in place. I didn't even know, I think, what the word boundary was until I reached adulthood. Because it was we share and we do this and the kids have an equal voice, but that gives a kid a lot of power. I almost had too much power.
Yeah.
I wanted to see my parents as leaders, but I know that for my mother, and we've long talked about it since then, is that whenever she would try to set a limit, first of all, my brother, who's now an attorney, we would try to argue her out of it. And she would say, oh, my kids make a really good case. But she also never wanted to feel like she was limiting us. So she had a hard time setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to stay in that dynamic with our parents, even when we're parents ourselves. And even being an adult, but additionally, like I'm trying to parent my kids and have boundaries and all this, but somehow I'm still falling into these traps that I'm breaking in my own house. Like I gotta walk the walk. I have to be consistent.
Yeah. There's a few things with that, right? I feel like some people respond with like still trying to make their parents proud of them or to feel validated. And then you have these people that are still kind of like afraid of their parents. So if their parents say like, why are you doing that with your child? You should be doing this with your child. Then they're like, oh, maybe they're right. And then there's the ones that are still kind of living their life for their parents versus living it for themselves. Now, this isn't everybody, but this is very common.
I'm never going to tell you you need to feel differently toward your parents. You don't know me from Adam. I'm a stranger on the internet. But I will tell you that I was where you are for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe longer than I thought I was going to spend there, but I'm not anymore. So don't feel like that anger makes you righteous if you think moving on from it would be healing. It doesn't let your parents off the hook. It's not about them. It's about you.
Right.
Because carrying that is heavy.
Right. Well, forgiveness and acceptance is not about the other person.
Totally.
And I think that's a hard concept on its own, right? It's not like I can forgive because I'm letting myself move past something and be done with that. And this is not to say that some parents are incredibly toxic. And for those people listening, yes, by all means, cut them out of your life. That doesn't mean but that still doesn't mean hold on to that grudge, because that's only affecting your life. You're not affecting their life by having the grudge. But letting go is okay to do if it's that toxic. Obviously, we're talking about parents who genuinely loved us. They just dropped the ball on a thing or two, and like we love them. But some parents don't deserve that.
Yeah.
So it's important to divide that.
And I went through all of that, when I had my first child. And I started diving into this work and sharing it with my parents. And there were some tough conversations.
Yeah.
But then I saw that maybe they didn't always want to have the conversations with me, but they were treating my daughter with the knowledge that they had gained. And that was the real payoff. It was like,
interesting.
Maybe we don't want to sit and hash out all this pain with you from 1996 or whatever, but we're not going to repeat this stuff with your child. It's been a really great way to kind of reverse engineer our relationship. I mean, we were in a really good place before I had kids, but it did sort of bring that stuff back up for me. And so then I had kids and then I started all this and I said, what if parents brought the fun to parenthood that kids bring to childhood? Kids are wired for fun. And as I said to you when we had our first chat, you don't step through a portal where you trade fun for responsibility. And so I said, play is how kids learn, music is how we remember things.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people out there maybe who think that some of the stuff that I do is juvenile, but
Everybody has an opinion about something.
yeah, but adult coloring books got popular for a reason. Lisa Frank had a resurgence for a reason. Like there is play within people that I
Yeah.
think they can cope with life better if they figure out how to access. And it doesn't have to be the dichotomy of, well, I'm parenting, this is serious, noble work, because it is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you can't have fun doing it.
No.
It's not like I'm playing with my kids and now I must go load the dishwasher. I put up a video where my kids are laughing their butts off at me and you can't see what I'm doing. And I said, I'm making coffee. I'm pretending I don't know how to make coffee. I make coffee every day, sometimes twice a day. I'm taking something that could just be, oh, I have to go make coffee because I'm tired. And I spoke their language through it.
Yeah.
We were able to connect. I didn't have to get on the floor and do Legos with them.
Or play Barbies or yeah. I feel like what you said is so important because I do this too. Like I'm pretty goofy. So I'm playing music really loud while I'm cooking and then I make them come. I'm like, come dance with me. And we'll dance while we're cooking or whatever. And that's playing. That's still playing. It doesn't mean that I have to play the video game if that's boring. I mean, sometimes it's okay to be bored. Don't get me wrong. You should show interest in the things your kids are interested in. Yeah. We all know that. But you don't have to burn yourself out on it.
Yeah.
Right. So find fun ways to play. So what does that look like? So I know goofing around while making coffee and pretending like you don't. What are other things that you do with the kids that are not the normal, we play the kids games?
Well, I think so. I want to preface all this by saying that I don't play with my kids that often. And I think that always really surprises people because I think, first of all, she stays home with them. What is she doing? If she's not playing with them. And they also figure she seems fun. She probably A, either really likes that or B, is really good at or whatever. But I think, so I like to really work smarter, not harder. And what that means is that if you have a culture of fun in your house and you find ways to work that fun in ways that are authentic to you and not always just authentic to them, I promise you, and anyone who's listening, you can give this a try and then report back. Your kids will make less specific demands on your time to do things that are fun to them because those are not the only ways that they connect with you. Yeah. So my kids don't ask me to play that often because they have fun with me a lot. What it looks like practically, because all this is great in theory, but I like to try to tell people what it looks like and what it sounds like.
Please.
That, they can try it on for size. And because sometimes you have to fake it till you make it and it feels weird. I just did a video about if your kids are screaming and you just can't take the noise anymore, how to deal with it. And I said, headphones and earphones, sometimes you need to soften the sound from a sensory perspective. I'm a very sound sensitive person. So me too. I have to actually combat this by playing music all day. I call it my sensory shield. So the screaming doesn't come out of silence. If I'm not hearing anything and then all of a sudden there's a shriek, my nervous system will just go into attack mode. Mm-hmm. But if there's music and there's a part of my brain, I'm sure there's neurology on this that I just don't know. If there's a part of my brain that's processing sound and then there's an additional sound, it will be less jarring to me to get, and of course I'm snapping my fingers because I'm talking with my hands.
That's fine.
If it'll be less jarring for me to experience that noise and to devote resources to hearing it than it is if it comes out of nothing. So that's a big thing for me. But I said, sometimes it's okay to be human and to let your kids know that you're overwhelmed. So I lay on the floor. Sometimes if my kids are losing their marbles, even if it's happy screaming, I will just lay down. And my kids are like, did we break mom? Is she okay? And so, or sometimes I'll just be like, and I'll yell. I don't want to yell into my microphone. And they'll say, what are you doing? I'll say, well, I thought that's what we were doing. I thought it was time to scream and yell. And I like to scream and yell sometimes too. And I want to contribute. So I thought I was just supposed to go, and now we're all laughing. And it also lets them know, it's okay to do those things. I'm not
Yeah.
living in a monastery where these things aren't welcome. Let's just like control the chaos a little bit. So if you guys need to scream and yell, like that's cool. But give me a heads up. Either I'm gonna like go over here, I'm gonna put my noise canceling headphones on, I'm gonna scream with you, like I'm gonna get a tambourine and we'll turn it into a song, whatever the case is. But I try to put moments of activity throughout the day where we're like physically moving, because I find my kids start to lose their marbles, even if they're happy. If they're doing like a focused activity for too long,
Yeah.
if they're just drawing for hours, they might be happy while they're drawing, but the second they stop, they're out of their minds. I I challenge myself every day to take an activity and turn it on its ear in some way. So either we listen to a different kind of music while I'm cooking, or I unload the dishwasher, we set the table and we can only walk backwards. Or, we brush our teeth and we have to use the opposite hand. Or like
Yeah.
something so minor, and it sounds really dorky, and it is. But if we're all stuck home, it's like Groundhog Day for the past year. Every single
Yep.
day is the same. So when I wake up in the morning, if I can think like, what's a weird thing that I could do today to shake up the energy in my house? And it could like, people think, they look at like Instagram accounts with these activities and everything looks Pinterest perfect. And they think, how am I going to create this environment for your kids? Need you. They want the person that they're the most connected with, that they think is the coolest person that they ever met. Just making them smile or laugh and opening that door to play. Because
Yeah.
once you create that environment by doing truly sometimes the bare minimum, like it does not take a lot, your kids will take care of the rest.
Yeah.
They are so wired for that. They will take that ball and they will just run with it. The block for a lot of parents is that they feel resentment sometimes around having to do the work of play. They feel like, well, I have stuff to get done. Like I
We're
can't just be
stressed
goofing
out.
around.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
just stressed, right? It's like, it's not that moms don't love their kids or want to spend that time with their kids, but I feel like sometimes especially right now, we're like, I am doing 82 things all the time. And oh my God, like, did I have this plan at the beginning of the pandemic for my house to be like so well organized? Because why not? We're home all the time. Holy crap, my house has never been so unorganized as it is right now, because there's always someone doing something in it. Right.
Yeah.
So we're just like, and then you're like, oh, and, play with your children. And it's like, it's
If
hard.
it feels like another thing on the to-do list, and it
Mhm.
feels like it's just going to slow down and delay everything you have to do.
Yeah.
But
We're
one of the
keeping it
things,
simple.
it's going to be work either way.
Yeah.
Like this is always sort of my credo, is parenthood is going to take work. You're never going to reach a point where it's not work on some level.
Yeah.
It's the kind of work that it is. Either you put in a little thoughtfulness at the front end to get into habits that are going to make things so much easier in the long run, or you're going to feel miserable and be working on regulating yourself
Yeah.
and finding ways to connect with your kids. Like it's just a matter of saying, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit more intentional about the work that I do, instead of trying to course correct, or, trying to put a band-aid over things, or maybe take what feels like a shortcut right now and isn't really.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of putting systems in place where it makes things run more smoothly and you get more cooperation and you end up with more collaboration. We have a good time, and I just want people to know that you can reach a place where that's possible, especially if you grew up and went through some stuff and, thought you had to be serious forever, and that was what adulthood was going to be. Because you're advertising adulthood to your kids. You want to show them that being a grown-up can be fun. It's not a dirge, I promise, most of the time.
I like how you said that, because yeah, it is. It's like they look at us and that's what it's like to be an adult. So if we're always stressed out and like, this is so hard and you want me to just stop everything and do this with you, but I need to do this and this. And I'm guilty of that sometimes. It's like, it's this year, especially, I feel like there's been a lot of moments where I'm like, I cannot do that right now. I've already told you I have to do this and like that, and it does probably paint a very ugly photograph in their head of what being an adult looks like, which, oh my gosh, like, you're 9, 10 years old and now you're like terrified to grow up. And it's like,
Yeah, well,
oh no,
especially right now.
I know, right? Well, and then, but the other side of that is like, I love being a grown up. Like, I can act like a kid when I want to, and I can act like a grown up when I want to. I hate bills, like, those suck, and responsibilities and yada yada. But like, I still prefer my adult life than my child life.
Same
So,
here.
yeah. So, showing that to our children. Yeah, you're right. That's really important. There's a few of your videos that I've watched that talk about certain content that I would love to touch on. So, really, just phrases that we hear very commonly from parents. And then, so one of them is, why can't my kid just fill in the
Oh,
blank? So, why can't my kid just go to sleep when I tell them to? Or why can't my kid just put their toys away? And that's it's such a common thing as a parent that we tend to like just say.
yeah. Or why can't my kid just listen? Which really then
Mhm.
encompasses everything. Listen to, hey, go to
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah.
Listen
Yeah.
to, you know, and I always say, when you hear why can't my kid just, it means that you are I always try to flip everything back to the self, because all we can truly genuinely control is ourselves.
True.
So if I'm saying, why can't my kid do XYZ? The first thing that I try to do is, well, what am I craving? Am I craving control? Am I craving obedience? Am I craving some order? So then once I'm done with that, sometimes that solves the problem. Sometimes I just say, you know what, like I just need to adjust something about me or where I'm coming from. And then it's not really about what my kid is doing at all. Sometimes, though, it is about something that my kid is doing. So then the second thing I always try to do is assume good intent, which means that at any given moment, my kid is doing the best that they can. And this is something you get a lot of pushback with parents about, because they'll say, well, my kid is antagonizing me on purpose, or my kid is whatever, but something's in the way. And this one I always say, you are the coolest person they know. If you are the coolest person that they know and the most important relationship in their lives, but there's a disconnect there, or they can't do something that you want them to do, then what's in the way? So sometimes it's just that, you're asking them to clean up and it's too overwhelming. I think we've all sort of walked into the kitchen and felt too overwhelmed by the counters and just like wanted to turn around and leave.
Yeah.
That was actually me until this week. And I finally needed to film a music video. And I was like, well, it's time to deal with my kitchen counters. So how can I expect, my 5-year-old to like have more motivation and planning skills than I do, to be in the mood for something at a given time.
Right.
So I try to think, okay, if they need my support, what kind of support am I willing to give? Let's plan the when. So let's say for cleaning up, we'll do it after dinner. Or if the kid's old enough, I like to collaborate. I always try to go to the problem solving. Hey, I've noticed that you're having a little bit of trouble cleaning up. Or I noticed that, you're really stalling on bedtime. Now, other thing I always say with bedtime is like, what kid, especially even with babies, I say this, what kid wants their day with their favorite person to end? Kids need more connection, because it's like you're trying to scrape, the last of the ice cream bowl or whatever to get all the good stuff before it's over. So you're having a little bit of trouble doing this. What's going on? How can I help? And then it's, hey, we're on the same team. We've got the same goal to make things a little bit more comfortable for you. Do you have any ideas about it? When it gets to why can't they just, there's usually a reason. There's a developmental piece at play, or, sometimes they did it once. Why can't they keep doing it? It's not always going to be linear. It's not like the day your kid can tie their shoes that they're going to make a perfect bow every day in perpetuity. Like, I think we have to show our kids a little bit more grace. And I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to caregiving tasks, they use those tasks as a way to connect. So can you just cut my food for me? Can you just put this shirt over my head?
Can you
And
zipper my zipper? Or,
yeah.
yeah.
And if the fear in the back of your mind is, if I do this for my kid now, I'm setting a precedent that I'm going to have to do this forever. Number one, like, let's take that look into the future. Let's travel down the rabbit hole together. That's probably not the case. Probably not have to go to college and zipper their zipper. But also, if your kid is feigning, let's say, helplessness because they want to connect with you, I mean, to me, thank goodness to have that clear, easy sign that they need something.
Yeah.
Because a kid, even of an age older than my kids, for instance, they're not going to say, hey, I need you to just give me a little extra love. Hey, this is a really tough time. Like, I'm so burnt out from virtual school, and I'm so burnt out from whatever. And I'm worried about the future, and I don't like wearing masks, and a million other things are going through a kid's head. They're not going to say
Yeah.
all that. They're going to say, can you pour water for me? Can you brush my teeth? Like, whatever it is. If you see those things as communication, if you see bumping up against those limits as a need, I think it's so much easier to be kind around them and to
Yeah.
just take them for what they are instead of feeling frustrated.
Let's just like face it. There isn't a mother in the world who at some point doesn't lose her shit, and like probably in front of their children, right? And that's one of those things that I feel like we feel real guilty about when we've come back down. I think it's so important to like just ownership of that behavior, because we're trying to teach these people, these little people, how to manage their own emotions and feelings. And so, how are we supposed to teach them to do that if we're pretending like it didn't happen?
I'll show you grace, but I won't let you off the hook, meaning that things are going to happen. But if you're in a repeated pattern of losing it, you're noticing that certain events are really something that you struggle with, you keep flying off the handle. Now you got to dig a little bit deeper. Nobody's asking for perfection, but we're saying if you're noticing a cycle of behavior within yourself, what do you need for support instead of just saying, like, oh, hey, this happens, but the art of an apology is something that is so worth learning and definitely worth modeling,
Yeah.
and being able to go to our kids and say, hey, I know you didn't feel good about yesterday, this morning, lunchtime, whatever it was. I didn't feel good either. Do you have a second? Can we talk about it? And then respecting that. So making sure that you can bring it up with them. Maybe they're still upset. That's their right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to feel like more garbage if that's the case, but that's still their prerogative, and to
It's
ask
not
for,
their job to make you feel better
yeah,
about your action. Right.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's like, please, 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 I feel horrible and I need to talk
Yes.
this out right now. And they're like,
I want you to hug me and tell me I'm awesome, and
Mhm.
those are the moments that I realize how much I value my kids' opinion of me and our relationship is when, maybe they're not thinking I'm so great, and then I'm like, this really matters to me. And as somebody who did not really need that from anyone ever, it's
Yeah.
weird. Like, I don't like it, but it means the relationship matters. So, you know, I I ask him if it's okay if we can talk. And even my 3-year-old, like, will have an opinion. Sometimes he will say no, and he'll like still go play by himself for a little bit and then he'll, pitter patter back over. And then I always try to acknowledge what happened, acknowledge what I could do differently next time.
Mhm.
And then, ask them if either they still want some space or if they'd like to, with my kids play together for a little bit. They say, hey, I didn't feel good about this. I know, I raised my voice or I was really snippy. That was about me. It was not because of you. I wasn't feeling so good. And next time I feel that way, I'm going to either walk away, I'm going to go put on a song and dance it out. I'm going to find a way
Right.
to chill a little bit. And, does that sound okay? Can we play for a little bit? Or do you still, want some space? And usually, it's okay. I mean, kids are so forgiving, they're so
Yeah.
resilient, almost too much so. But that's why I still want to model that process instead of just assuming it's fine, because that lets
Yeah.
me off the hook, right? And that's not necessarily fair or helpful to them or teaching them anything about what a good relationship looks like
Yeah. And
just because
letting
they're
them
fine on their
know.
mom.
Right. Well, it lets them know for other relationships as well that it's okay
Exactly.
to not to just keep forgiving behavior. I think that that's important too. And I totally love how you said with the parent's perspective that like you're looking at it as an adult behavior. So you're like, I don't want my kid to scream and throw things when they're upset, because like you can't do that as an adult in society. Right. Like you talking about that. And it's like, well, yeah, because like just because a 7-year-old gets pissed off and throws the stuffed animals across the room does not mean that my 40-year-old son is going to throw a desk at his boss one day, like, but I think as we're adults and we have adult brains, we look at everything from an adult perspective.
So you've hit on one of my absolute favorite topics to talk about, which is coping mechanisms and how that starts a bigger conversation about the behavior of kids and trusting that the development's going to occur. And with some behaviors, that's really easy to accept, like that your 1 year old isn't going to be nursing in high school, that your kids are eventually going to be able to fall asleep without you being in bed with them, that they're not going to be wearing diapers going to college. There's certain benchmarks that we accept, although sometimes still with a little bit of resistance, more readily than others. And for whatever reason, when it comes to dealing with emotions,
Yeah.
we have so much trouble accepting certain behaviors as developmentally appropriate because we just immediately take that and extrapolate and just think it's always going to be that way. That the way that our kid acts as a toddler or a young kid or an adolescent or even a teenager is going to be the same exact thing that they do down the line in other relationships. And then we will have in some way failed them. And I just want to strongly challenge that way of thinking
Yeah.
and say, I understand how scary it is for us because we do all know adults who can't manage their emotions.
Yeah.
And who behave in ways that they shouldn't. And it's not that those people don't exist and it's not that those things don't occur, but I think that we can create an environment in our home and a culture of emotional literacy where eventually the developmental piece will fall into place.
Yeah.
And they'll learn to manage things a different way because they'll still be talking about their feelings and they'll still feel that their emotions are welcome. And it won't be that pot bubbling over all the time where, they're just feeling out of control necessarily. Or if they are, they'll have someone that they can talk to in you who can say, hey, yeah, this is normal. And they won't feel all of that extra tension that comes from shame
Mm-hmm.
and the need for privacy and shame again some more, because when you think your feelings aren't okay, then they explode more when they do eventually come out.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can just normalize it and equalize it and direct your kid to doing what is safe for them. And I always use the analogy or the example rather, I'm a thrower. So that's still my natural inclination at 35 years old. Like I want to throw stuff. I love to throw. It's like where I go when I'm really angry or frustrated. That doesn't mean that I've ever thrown at a job. It doesn't mean I've ever thrown something at a partner. It just means like that's what my body wants to do. So when I'm mad, I go in my room and I like chuck all my pillows or whatever. It's fine. Like I'm a person with a fully formed brain who still has an inclination for certain behavior, and that doesn't make the behavior wrong.
As long as you do it safely, right?
Yeah,
And it's like knowing the boundary there. Yeah.
that's it. Like, so your kid wants to scream, and maybe they'll still be coming home from high school and screaming into a pillow, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
they'll take up boxing, or like there's nothing wrong with the behavior necessarily. It's just a matter of supporting it, as they grow, and then maybe they'll make a different choice. If I just can't handle the upset, that's my work.
Yeah.
If their discomfort makes me so uncomfortable that I'm just trying to get them to do something to stop it because it's really tough for me, that's a great opportunity to, self-examine a little bit.
Yeah. Which we can all do all the time. Like there's
Yeah.
never a point in our lifetimes where I feel like we could just stop being a little better or doing a little better, growing or learning from ourselves, right? I mean, I think there comes to a point where that we just stop giving a shit. Like, like I don't think I'm
Give
gonna
a
be
shit.
92 and someone's gonna be like, you could be doing better. I'm gonna be like, screw you, I'm 92. Like, I'm cool.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it's like right now, yes, we get to do that and to be humbled to that, to be open to that idea, I think is so important because we tend to attach shame to change. Like if I'm doing better, that means I'm not good enough. And like, hey, here's the thing, you're doing the best you can. And like that is good enough for right now. But if you want to do better, then do better. Like it's as simple as that. Nobody's saying you're a bad mom.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have loved talking with you today. This has been a very fun conversation. It's always so easy flowing. I know we would vibe well together. I'm so
Yeah, I
glad you're here.
agree.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was super fun. I know we could have gone like 3 more hours, but
I I think we probably could have. And I'm like, ooh, who's gonna listen to a 4-hour podcast? Anybody? I'll do it if you guys want me to. Um, but I really do appreciate having you on. And the description below the podcast and the YouTube channel will both have links to hear more about Ange and watch her videos and see all the fun stuff that she does. So please go check her out there.